Twin sister seduced every boyfriend I had, now I can't let her near my current guy after my parents spilled the beans. This twisted cycle has played out with every single guy I've dated or even crushed on. I've only been in 3 relationships before my current one with John, but each and every time, my twin sister Sarah just couldn't keep herself out of the picture. It's not just meddling, Sarah makes it her mission to sabotage me. 2 of my exes actually cheated on me with her. The third was different, we broke up for unrelated reasons, but even then, Sarah was relentless, trying to seduce him. He was a genuinely good guy with firm boundaries, yet that didn't stop her. She would send him nudes, playing it off with a classic, oops, wrong person excuse when he called her out. When seduction didn't work, she tried to destroy us by spreading lies that I was cheating. She told my ex, our mutual friends, anyone who would listen. He didn't buy it, but some friends believed her. That mess was fun to clean up. Not. Even back in middle and high school, her sabotage started early. If Sarah caught wind of a crush I had, she'd swoop in and go after the guy herself. I used to think confiding in my sister about these things was normal. After all, isn't that what sisters are supposed to do? Instead, she weaponized every secret. Once, I told her I was mustering the courage to ask my crush to prom. She beat me to it and asked him herself. She told me straight-faced that he'd only been interested in me to get to her. Another time, a few years before, she loudly announced in our shared class that I liked this boy who was constantly bullied. The other kids zeroed in on him, making his life hell, and he ended up hating me for it. I felt guilty for months, while Sarah just laughed and called it hilarious. Or there's the time she told a teacher, whose class I was struggling in, that I wanted to do favors for better grades. That bombshell got dropped with the administration, earning me a counseling investigation before it was finally cleared. The embarrassment was unbearable. She wrote it off as a prank. There are so many stories like this. Sarah has either managed to get guys who were interested in me to sleep with her or sabotage things before they could even begin. She's even ruined friendships. She once told my high school best friend that I'd been gossiping cruelly behind her back, complete with fake text messages as proof. The foundations of my trust have been pulled out from under me again and again. It's reached the point where I barely know if Sarah genuinely wants these people, or if she just enjoys destroying my chances. Sometimes, I get the feeling it's not even jealousy, it's just some sick thrill she chases. I wasted the first couple years of college lost in depression and a gaming addiction because all this got to me so badly. Recently, though, I've started to get my life back on track. That's when I met my boyfriend, John, at a campus organization. For once, I decided to keep Sarah out of it. But today, things took a turn. John ended up meeting my parents completely by accident. We keep limited contact, so their unannounced visits from 5 hours away aren't exactly welcome, but today was one of those days. There was no hiding John, and I had to introduce them. He already knew I was hesitant about bringing them into my dating life, given our rocky relationship. Sarah still lives at home while going to college nearby, and I just know my parents will mention John to her. Next time they pop by, she'll insist on coming, or start stalking my social media to figure out who he is. I've tried, really tried, to explain to my parents why this is a problem. They refuse to believe me. Instead, they claim Sarah just wants to be included, to know what's happening in my life. But her involvement is the problem. We used to be closer, back when I foolishly thought I could trust her. Now, I know too much about her own wild life, the stuff she hides from our strict, traditional parents. She likes to party a little too much, sometimes drives drunk or high, and spends weekends studying when she's actually clubbing and crashing at friends' places. She's had more hookups than I could count, sometimes coming to me for last-minute plan B. She's even confided in me about hookups with girls when wasted, however that worked out. But whenever I needed someone to talk to, she was never there. She only listens if she can store up ammunition to use against me. I've started hiding most things from her. If my parents knew even a fraction of what she gets up to, they'd see I'm not just being petty about her meeting my boyfriend. It's not jealousy or a grudge, I genuinely worry what she'd do. But if I exposed her, our parents would almost definitely kick her out, they're that strict. They don't believe in sex before marriage. John is actually the first person I've had sex with, and I know Sarah would use that against me if she found out. So here I am, caught. How do I keep Sarah from finding out about John and wrecking this relationship like she has every single one before? How do I make my parents understand I need to keep them separate, without exposing Sarah and potentially destroying her life, too? I just want this one thing untouched by her interference. Update 1. I've made a lot of big changes in my family life lately, and honestly, it's been wild. The first thing I did was sit down with my boyfriend and just tell him everything. I laid it all out, every uncomfortable detail about my sister and my family's relentless interference. He was shocked, but assured me immediately he would never cheat on me, with my sister or anyone for that matter. He completely respected my decision when I told him I didn't want my sister to ever meet him, and honestly, just knowing he backed me up was a real relief. Taking some advice to heart, I chose to block my sister on all social media. Not even 10 minutes passed before I got a text, "Did you block me on Instagram and Facebook?" No way was I going to dance around it. I admitted I had, explaining it was because I couldn't stand how she kept messing with my personal relationships. She immediately tried to guilt trip me about not telling her about my boyfriend, Which basically confirmed for me that my parents must have spilled everything to her, something I was sure would happen. She totally exploded, insisting she would never have tried to stalk him or anything, but I hadn't even said I was specifically worried about that. She just blurted it out, which felt telling in itself. I told her straight up that I didn't trust her not to try to take people from me. She called me psycho and selfish, but honestly? Whatever. There's just no reasoning with her. She never sees what she does wrong. Arguing with her feels like arguing with a small child, so I blocked her number too. Still, I couldn't shake this lingering guilt. What if there was some emergency and she truly needed me? But she and I live hours apart, and if there truly was an emergency, surely my parents would call. I had to remind myself it wasn't my responsibility to make myself available to be heard over and over. Soon after I'd blocked my sister, my mom called. She wanted to grill me about what I was doing and was already upset based on, no surprise, my sister's dramatic version of events. I tried my best to explain my side, without dragging my sister's poor decision-making about drugs and sex into it, because I refused to stoop to revenge or pettiness. I told her all I wanted was for my sister to stop interfering in my life and that in the past she'd been inappropriate with guys I've dated, spread rumors about me, and destroyed my trust. That wasn't enough for my mom. She instantly zeroed in on inappropriate, demanding to know what I meant by that. My parents are incredibly conservative, no sex before marriage, that level. My dad even joined the call at one point, turning the whole thing into an inquisition. I kept telling them the details didn't matter. My mom again circled back, wanting to know if I was having premarital sex like that was the entire point. It was infuriating. I just wanted them to hear that my sister had betrayed my trust, but they wouldn't drop it. Eventually, they switched tactics, pushing me to forgive my sister, saying family should stick together, that they couldn't stand us fighting. From their perspective, me simply refusing to be in contact equaled fighting. Then they suggested I come home for the weekend to talk it all out as a family. I flat out told them no, I wasn't going to do that, and didn't have the time. Next thing I knew, they were threatening to come visit me instead, unannounced, something they'd done before, even though I've made it clear I hate surprise visits. I told them firmly that if they showed up uninvited again, I simply wouldn't let them in. That set off a meltdown on their end. I had to listen to them rant about how I'm always making the family miserable, and how ungrateful I am. They kept calling and messaging nonstop, alternating between begging to talk and aggressively accusing me of being a terrible daughter and sister. Eventually I just blocked them both on my phone and social media. They even threatened to stop paying for my college if I cut them off entirely. That was enough to get me to unblock them briefly, just to say that I did want them in my life and I do love them, but I couldn't tolerate any more ambush visits or invasive prying into my relationships. If they could accept those boundaries, I'd happily keep up some kind of relationship. My message was met with a mile-long list of reasons why I'm the villain. It was overwhelming. I reached my breaking point and reblocked them yesterday. Now I don't even know what's happening with my tuition or what comes next with them. Thankfully, my boyfriend has been a rock through all of this, supportive, patient, and honestly more understanding than I deserve right now. He keeps telling me my parents are controlling and my sister is out of her mind, and I can't say I disagree. Still, I feel terrible. I just want one of them, any of them, to actually listen to my side for once. But if they won't, what am I supposed to do, besides letting them control every aspect of my life or finally taking some power back for myself? It sucks that things have to feel so final. In a perfect world, I'd gladly compromise, maybe see the family by planning a visit once in a while, or chat with my sister about safe, impersonal stuff. But they always push for more, want more, and refuse to accept anything less than full access. So here I am, stuck between what I want and what my family will never allow me to have. Update 2. I figured going quiet would buy me a week of peace. Instead, at 1:17 a.m., there was pounding on my door and 2 campus cops with welfare check faces. I was standing there in John's big hoodie with my hair in a mess bun, and they're telling me my parents called claiming I was in danger, that I was isolating under coercion. I had to do that awkward middle of the night I'm fine, I'm not suicidal, no one's holding me hostage dance while John blinked awake behind me, confused and furious. When they left, all I could think was they finally figured out a way to get inside my apartment without me letting them in. The morning after, John showed me a DM from a brand new account with 3 followers and a username that was literally 2 random words and numbers. Hey, we should talk, then a photo that was cut off just high enough not to be outright porn but explicit enough to make my face go hot. The caption said, "Oops, wrong person," and then immediately another message, "Unless you're into it." He hadn't responded. He handed me his phone and just said, "Is this her?" I didn't even need to see her face. The background was her duvet. I recognized the stupid gold throw pillow she loves. He blocked it, screenshot everything, and sent it to me. By that afternoon, she had found his campus organization. Their Instagram has a public calendar. She came to their meeting. I wasn't there at first. I showed up late because I was coming straight from class. I walked in right as Sarah had cornered him near the door with this sugary voice she does, head tilted, playing the "we've never gotten a fair chance to get to know each other" angle. He was very clear. "I'm dating your sister. Back off." She did the wounded laugh and said, "She doesn't really care about you, she's using you to piss off my parents, She always does this, and you could see a few heads snap. He said, louder, you need to leave. She flinched like he'd hit her, stepped back and said, wow, okay, abusive much? She reached for his arm. He pulled away. The president of the org came between them. I said her name, and she looked at me like I'd ruined the punchline. Then she told me if I didn't grow up and stop acting like I own people, she was going to tell my parents what I've been doing. I honestly laughed. The disrespect just fell out of me. The president told her to leave. She refused. Campus security got called. She finally stormed out muttering about how pathetic this all was. I took that straight to the dean of students' office with my little stack of screenshots and the file number from the nighttime welfare check. The woman I spoke to didn't blink. She said what Sarah was doing qualified as harassment, and because Sarah isn't a student at my university, they could issue a persona non grata letter barring her from campus buildings and events. I signed it. They emailed her and CC'd me. Watching her name in my inbox next to notice of trespass felt unreal. I also met with a campus advocate who told me to keep a log and to stop feeling guilty for doing literally the bare minimum to keep myself safe. That night, Sarah called from a new number. Then another. Then my mom's number came through John's phone. It was a voicemail that started with young man and rolled downhill into a sermon about decency and sin and how he brought division into a godly family. We both just sat there at my kitchen table listening to my mother talk about me like I was already a cautionary tale. John finally said, gently, you don't have to let any of them talk to me. I blocked all the unknowns and turned my phone off. I stopped protecting Sarah in my head after that. I sent my parents an email, short, calm, and different from every message I've ever sent them. I told them Sarah had sent my boyfriend sexual messages, that she showed up at his meeting, that security escorted her out and that she is now barred from my campus. I attached screenshots with her full name blacked out even though every part of me wanted to send the full thing. I told them they may disagree with my choices, but this is not an argument about morality, it's a boundary around harassment. I said surprise visits and welfare checks are done. If they show up uninvited, I will not open my door. If they weaponize police again, I will file a report myself. If they want a relationship, it will be scheduled and on neutral ground. I did not ask them for money. I asked them to stop. I also walked into financial aid and sat there with my bag in my lap like a kid waiting for a principal. I showed them the welfare check record and the trespass letter and told them my parents were threatening to cut tuition to control me. The advisor nodded like she'd heard this 1,000 times and said we can do a dependency override for my FAFSA based on estrangement. She said she'd need documentation from a third party, and my campus advocate wrote a letter on the spot. They got me into emergency grants to cover the rest of the semester, put me on work study, and told me if I wanted to be an RA next fall, I should apply this week. I walked out with a list of steps and a little lump in my throat because the floor stopped feeling like it was falling away. The weirdest part is how quickly the curtain burned up once I took a match to it. A girl I barely know DM'd me a screen recording of Sarah's private story. It was a room full of girls and someone yelling twin wins, and Sarah laughing with a crown emoji over her head. Then screenshots from a group chat where she literally had a score next to guys' names, a running joke about me and my baby morals. She wrote gold star if I get this one without kissing him. I never wanted that kind of proof. I always thought if I had it, I'd feel vindicated, but it was just hollow. I put it in the folder with everything else and sat on my bed and stared at nothing for a very long time. 2 days later, my dad sent a single line back to my email. We are ashamed. It read like a verdict. Tuition is officially gone. My health insurance too. I spent the morning calling the student health center and then my bank and then my boss at my on-campus job asking for more hours, my voice steady like I've done this before. John asked me if I wanted him at the RA info session or if I needed to do it alone. I told him to come sit in the back and make faces to cheer me up, and he did exactly that. Sarah tried one more time. She showed up outside my building wearing a sweatshirt of his org and texted from a new number, come down alone. I didn't. I called campus security, told them there was a trespassed individual outside. They walked her off the sidewalk and told her if she stepped foot on campus again, it would be criminal. She texted me, you actually did this to me, and then, you'll miss me when everybody chooses me anyway. I blocked it. I made dinner with John. We ate at my tiny table and he reached across and squeezed my hand once and didn't make me talk about it if I didn't want to. My apartment was quiet in a way I didn't realize I'd been craving. I keep waiting to feel like the villain they say I am. It hasn't hit. I feel tired, and a little scared, and pretty broke, but every time my phone lights up and it's not my family, there's this small glow behind my ribs that feels like the beginning of something new. I'm not naive, I know she'll find other ways to circle me. But for the first time, she walked at me and hit a wall I built. It held. That's new. That's mine. Update 3. I thought the next big thing would be the RA interview or maybe a quiet weekend where nothing blew up. Instead, I got an email from Student Conduct with my name and John's in the subject line and every nerve in my body went cold. You have been named in a complaint. His face changed as he read too. The complainant was S. Redacted, but it didn't need a name. The summary said sexual harassment at the campus org meeting, unwanted touching, verbal intimidation. I could literally see the moment where she flinched and pretended he hit her typed into a formal paragraph. They scheduled intake interviews for both of us and sent a list of our rights and resources like we were the ones who needed them. When the investigator asked if there were witnesses, John laughed once with no humor. The president of the org emailed back within an hour. Then another officer, and a girl who'd been sitting near the door, and the building manager who pulled hallway footage. I watched them stack around him like sandbags. The investigator was calm to the point of boring. She asked for screenshots, and I slid my little folder across and told her there was also a trespass letter with Sarah's name on it. She blinked at that. "Okay," she said. "That helps." I took the train downtown to the courthouse the next morning with my spine buzzing like I'd gulped coffee wrong. The clerk told me to take a number and a seat and circle every no contact box that applied. There's a line where you have to write what you want the court to stop someone from doing. I wrote contacting me directly or through others, contacting my boyfriend, showing up to my residence, campus, or place of work, and my hand looked steadier than I felt. The judge who read my petition didn't ask me why I hadn't tried to solve it in the family. He didn't ask me about sin. He looked at the screenshots, the trespass notice, the report from campus security, and he signed a temporary order. A deputy asked where to serve her. They hit her at my parents' house. I found out because my mother called from an unknown number and left a voicemail of herself crying like she was kneeling at an altar. "Your sister is devastated," she said. "This is persecution." I scrubbed a spoon that didn't need scrubbing and listened twice and then emailed her back one line: "I'm following lawful steps to stop harassment." When she wrote back, "You are breaking us," I closed my computer and put it face down on the counter. 2 days into waiting, Student Conduct emailed again, this time to John only. "Interim measures not necessary at this time." The investigator asked if he was comfortable with her reaching out to the entire sign-in sheet for statements. He said yes. The president sent a letter that read like a witness in a courtroom. He noted Sarah refusing to leave, the security escort, and that no physical contact occurred despite her repeated attempts. Someone else included a timestamped selfie they'd taken at the door with both of them in the background. "You can see everything. His hands are up. Her hand is on his sleeve. Her face is furious." I got an email from financial aid that afternoon with the subject line "Dependency Override Decision." I stared at it until the words blurred and then made myself click "Approved." It was 3 paragraphs of formal relief. My FAFSA would be processed as independent this year and next, my aid recalculated, my emergency grant dispersed within 48 hours. I cried in the bathroom at work and then went back to the front desk and let out staplers like nothing had happened. The hearing on the restraining order felt like walking into a play I didn't audition for. Sarah came with both of my parents flanking her like an honor guard. She wore a pale sweater and no makeup and her hands were folded. It's an old trick. She went first because she was the respondent and wanted to be heard. She said I was unstable and influenced, that John was isolating me from my faith and my family, that she had come to my campus out of concern and he had aggressively escalated. She must have practiced the word escalate. She used it 4 times, like repetition could make it true. My turn was short because it didn't need to be long. I handed the judge the folder. I told him about the welfare check after midnight and the trespass notice, and how she'd messaged my boyfriend from burners and shown up in his space, and then ignored clear boundaries and a direct request to leave. I didn't say she's made a sport out of this. I didn't say gold pillow. It was all there anyway. He read in silence, then looked at her and asked if she disputed the screenshots. She said they were taken out of context. He asked what context made "unless you're into it" to my boyfriend appropriate. She didn't have one. My mother made a sound and my father pressed his hand to her arm like he was holding the lid on a pot. The judge granted the order for a year. He added language prohibiting third-party contact on her behalf. He said directly to my parents that this meant them too. I didn't look back as I walked out. In the hallway, my mom tried to step into my path. "Sweetheart," she said like she was talking to a child. I said, "Email," and kept going. On the bus home I got a text from a number that didn't look like a spam bot. It was a girl I'd recognized from Sarah's private story screen recording. "I'm sorry," she wrote. "You should know," she said, she was going to teach him a lesson with Title IX. She thought it would be funny if he couldn't run meetings anymore. She sent a video of Sarah toasting with a plastic cup, voice amplified by a living room full of trader furniture. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah said, "I give you a campus king about to lose his crown." Someone off camera screamed. I forwarded it to the investigator with a 2-sentence note. She replied within the hour. "Received. Thank you." The next email from Student Conduct came quicker than I expected. They'd concluded the complaint. "Not substantiated," it said. In a line that read like a hand on a shoulder, it added, "We will be referring this matter to the appropriate office for review of misuse of university processes." John leaned against the counter and let out a breath that seemed to unhook from the middle of his ribs. He put his head on my shoulder and laughed into my sweatshirt like someone who's been underwater too long and suddenly remembers air exists. My phone lit up with my dad's name for the first time since the one-line shame verdict. I let it go to voicemail. His message was flat and tired. "This is not what we wanted," he said. "We don't know how to be your parents if you won't be our daughter." I looked at John and said, "Does he hear himself?" And John just shook his head no and handed me a spoonful of pasta like an answer. The RA interview was weirdly gentle. The hall director had me talk through a conflict and I didn't even have to reach for a hypothetical. I made a joke about enforcing quiet hours with a voice like a librarian and she smiled, then asked how I handle people who push. I write down what I said and what they did and I don't argue the feelings out of facts, I said without thinking, and she nodded like that was exactly what she wanted to hear. She called the next day to offer me a summer slot with a fall assignment if it went well. You'll have a single, she said, and the words glowed. A room that is mine on paper, a key I'll sign for. An actual paycheck and a waiver that makes numbers add up again. I got one more knock at my door that week, no pounding, no badge. It was the campus chaplain with a polite smile and my parents' church's pamphlet tucked under her elbow. Your family asked me to reach out, she said in a voice that's probably comforted people through real pain. I thanked her for coming and told her I wasn't interested in spiritual mediation, and if she wanted to meet with me, it would be as a student, not as an emissary. She seemed surprised, then said of course, and asked if I needed anything like a grocery card or winter coat. For a second it startled me that someone could ask that without strings. I'm okay, I said. I'm getting there. She nodded, left the pamphlet anyway, and I slid it under my fruit bowl like a truce flag I can ignore. That night John and I went to the late-night grocery store with our hoodies up and our cart wonky and one while screaming on certain tiles. We bought cereal and toilet paper, and he plucked a stupid pack of glow-in-the-dark star stickers off an end cap because my ceiling looks blank and too grown up sometimes. Back in my apartment, we stuck a few above the bed and then turned off the lights and just stared up. My phone buzzed once from an unknown number and then stopped. Somewhere out there she's probably drafting a new plan, a new account, a new story where I'm the villain and she's the main character. In here, the ceiling is softly dotted, his hand is warm, and the quiet is full of something I haven't had since we were kids, the feeling that if someone knocks, it'll be because I invited them. That, too, feels new. That, too, feels mine. Update 4. The RA key card beeped green and a door that was suddenly mine swung open on the smell of industrial cleaner and a window stuck just enough that I had to shoulder it. John carried the cheap set of pots we got at Target like he was moving crystal and I slid the glow-in-the-dark stars off my old ceiling with my fingernail and put them back in their sheet to bring them along like good luck. Training started the next morning with a binder and an icebreaker where we had to say our favorite campus building and something we're proud of. I said the library because it looks like a spaceship and being here, because it felt ugly to say surviving my family in front of the girl who's neighbors with the fire station and the boy who once convinced a floor to do quiet hours. It lasted 48 hours. My hall director knocked during a break where we were practicing roommate mediations and said, "Can I steal you for a second?" In a tone that people use when they've found someone's wallet or someone's kid. In her office she swiveled her screen and my name was in the from line of an email I did not write. It said I regretted accepting the position because it would be hypocritical for me to be a moral role model when I make adult content and had crossed lines with a resident last year. It used a smiley I'd stopped using in 10th grade. We didn't believe it, she said before my throat could close all the way. But we do have to document it. IT had already pulled the headers. It was a Gmail spun up 2 hours before, with a name that looked like my first name and my middle initial with one letter swapped. I scrolled all the way down with my fingers shaking and there was one more line under the signature. P.S. Ask her boyfriend. I laughed once because the audacity felt like a string snapping inside me. I walked back into the training room and sat on my chair like it was suddenly made of glass. I texted John emergency fake email and he was there before we finished the presentation on duty phones, leaning in the doorway quietly so he didn't get me in trouble and then walking me to campus police like it was the most normal thing in the world to do with a Tuesday afternoon. The officer on duty knew me from the trespass report. He slid a legal pad across and had me write, in block letters, how I found out and the names of anyone it was sent to. My hall director forwarded him the full headers. He said he'd flag it for the detective who handles cyber stuff and asked if I could not respond to any unknown addresses for a bit, and I almost said I never planned to again. The flyers showed up the next morning like mushrooms. 2 on the bulletin board by the elevators, 1 on the door to the basement study room, and 1 taped crooked to the trash room that somehow bothered me the most. Ask your RA about her side hustle with my first name in block letters like a thumbprint and a QR code that went to a link tree that linked to my Instagram and my page with a handle that was my last name with 2 X's and a number. My stomach tried to exit my body through my shoes. I scanned it because the officer told me to screenshot everything, not because I wanted to see, and the first photo was my face pasted on a body that wasn't mine in lingerie I would never buy, and I had this absurd thought in the middle of the nausea: she chose a brand I can't afford. John took my phone carefully like he was holding a bug we didn't want to crush or lose. Don't click around, he said softly. Just capture. He called the officer again while I pulled the flyers down with hands that left fingerprints. My hall director stood with her arms crossed like a parent at a soccer game watching a kid knee someone. We'll print new flyers today, she said to no one in particular and told my co-RA to go run interference if anyone asked questions and then looked right at me and said, "Go sit in my office and breathe." The detective called me an hour later. His voice sounded like someone who's had the same cell phone number since high school. He said what I already knew, that this fell under the restraining order because of the third-party clause and that even if she hadn't put her name on it, the timing and the content and the fact that it targeted my job linked it back. He asked if I had reason to believe it was my sister. I wanted to say I had a decade of it. I said there was a pattern of similar behavior and I had already submitted a folder. I dropped the screenshots of the deepfakes into an email and wrote one sentence about the flyers and the email to my hall director, and the detective replied with an auto-signature that had a badge and a fax number and subpoena compliance contact in small print. It felt like throwing a rope into a dark well and hearing it hit something solid. She didn't wait for the rope. At lunch, a number I didn't recognize lit my phone and I let it go to voicemail like my blood pressure asked me to, and then listened in the hallway with my back to the cinder block. A woman said she was with Community Standards at Sarah's college and that she'd received a referral from our student conduct office about misuse of process and patterns of harassment. "We have requested to meet with your sister," she said, "and we'd like to offer you a chance to submit anything you feel is relevant." My laugh came out like a cough. I told her I'd send the file, and then I did, and also the video of Campus King that I had saved and hadn't wanted to watch again. 10 minutes later she wrote back received and nothing else. It shouldn't have comforted me, but it did. That night the text came through from a new number with a link and no words. I never click blind now. I took a screenshot and airdropped it to John's laptop and we opened it in a browser in airplane mode like we were defusing a bomb. It was a Google Drive folder called Proof. Inside were doctored screenshots of my messages with timestamps in a font my phone has never used. One tried to show me texting John, "Don't tell anyone I'm doing this for extra money," and another with a chat with client. There was also an ungodly bad Photoshop of me on a couch we don't own. The file names had this neat little tagging system, final_final2_usethese, and a version labeled Twinwins. I felt rage like heat under my skin. John swore quietly and then took such a deep breath I thought he might pass out. I forwarded everything to the detective and didn't write a caption because nothing I could say would make it less ugly. I didn't hear back for a day and every time my phone buzzed I flinched like an animal. During desk hours I checked people in with a smile that felt stapled on and then went to the RA resource room and cried into a roll of blue painter's tape. The detective called early the next morning with the kind of voice people get when they're trying not to sound like they're delivering bad news. It wasn't bad. He said they'd served her with notice of a restraining order violation, criminal contempt, and a summons to appear next week. "We went to the address on file," he said. "She was home." He said my mother answered the door and then there was a little pause like even he didn't know the word for the sound he heard in the background. He told me to expect a reaction and to call if she contacted me at all, and to keep doing exactly what I was doing by funneling everything through him. When he hung up I sat on the floor of my new room with my back to my bed and let my face go slack. The stars we put up with John's fingertip on the ceiling glowed faint in the morning light and looked dumb and loyal. My parents didn't call. My dad sent an email with no subject line that said, "You are imprisoning your own sister." I replied with the case number and a line that said, "She is violating a lawful order to stop harassing me." My mother texted from a new number an hour later, a paragraph that started with Bible verses and slid into the court of public opinion and we can't walk into church. I put my phone face down and cut peppers with a too dull knife and John kept talking about nothing. A TikTok where a guy stacks oranges with his head, the grocery store's bad music, a cat he saw in a window, as if building a wall for me out of small normal things. Sarah did exactly what the detective said she would. 2 nights before her court date, the late-night desk phone rang and my co-RA handed it to me with her eyebrows up. A man said he was Pastor Tom and that as a shepherd he needed to come up and pray over my room. I said, "No," and then, "This is inappropriate," and he said, "Do not harden your heart," and I said, "If you show up to this building, you will be turned away," and wrote down the number with a shaking hand. The desk camera caught him leaning on the counter 10 minutes later with an earnest face and a pamphlet in his pocket. We didn't buzz him in. He knocked for 15 minutes and then finally went away. I sent the video clip to the detective with one sentence. "Pastor from my parents' church came to my dorm." He wrote back, "Noted. Third-party contact." The night before her hearing, a girl DM'd me from the same private story group as before and asked if I wanted to see something that made her sick. It was Sarah in a kitchen I recognized with a full sink and a bottle of wine, showing someone how to use an AI face app. "You just feed in enough selfies," she said, tipsy teacher voice, "and it does the rest. I didn't even have to buy the pro version." She laughed so hard she lost her breath once. "She'll never get to be the sweet one again," she said. I thought I'd used up my supply of disbelief. I hadn't. I sent it to the detective. He wrote, "Thank you," and CC'd someone at the DA's office. The hearing went like court always feels now: fluorescent lights, a carpet that swallows sound, and strangers with manila folders sitting in rows like a church without music. Sarah was in a blazer this time and her hair pulled back. My parents sat behind her with their hands folded like a portrait. The DA's office had a young woman with a ponytail who could have been in my psychology class. She read a brief statement that lined up the fake accounts and the flyers and the emails like dominoes, comma after comma, and then played the clip of Twinwins out loud. You could feel the temperature in the room change when Sarah's voice said, "I didn't even have to buy the pro version." My father made that same hand-on-arm motion like keeping a lid on a pot, and my mother put her fingers to her lips like she could push the words back into the phone. Sarah tried a different vein of performance, soft voice and damp eyes. She said she was responding to slander and humiliating treatment and that if this was contact, it was incidental, a word that sounded like she'd found it on a pamphlet. The judge who had granted my restraining order was sitting again, the same calm old face that reads everything like it's a recipe. He said, very plainly, you were ordered not to contact her or her boyfriend directly or through others. Creating social media accounts that impersonate and embarrass her and contacting her employer is contact. He said contact like a hammer. He found her in violation. He didn't take her into custody, this isn't TV, but he put her on pretrial conditions that read like stitches: no social media contact of any kind referencing me, no third-party messaging, mandatory evaluation, weekly check-ins. He looked directly at my parents and said, if either of you carries messages for her, you will be charged. I thought my mother would faint. She didn't. She stared at a spot on the carpet like it might open up. On the bus back I watched college kids shove backpacks under seats and argue gently about what to get for lunch, and it felt like being in a snow globe where everything tiny and normal keeps falling right while your weird weather rages in a corner. John met me at the stop and we walked past a guy doing card tricks badly and a little kid holding a balloon, and I felt something unclenched that I had been holding so long I forgot it was mine. We went to his org meeting because it was elections, the thing Sarah had tried to torpedo with Title IX, and he stood up to give his 2-minute speech with his hands tucked into his hoodie pocket like a high schooler and said something about wanting the space to be safe and fun and boring in the best ways. People laughed in the good way. They voted. He won. He sat down hard like his knees gave out, and I squeezed his knee under the table and he squeezed mine back, and for a second there was no family, no detective, no anything but fluorescent lights and the rattle of the old AC unit and someone passing a bag of Twizzlers down the row. I met his mother on FaceTime after. He handed me the phone unexpectedly in the kitchen and said, this is her, and she had kind eyes and a plant that had somehow survived several windowsill deaths behind her. She asked me what I was cooking and I said, pasta with jar sauce, and she said, the best sauce is the one you already have, like it was wisdom and not a pantry. She didn't ask about my family. She asked what classes I was taking and if I liked my professors, and told me she was sending a small box of things he forgot the last time he came home and maybe a second blanket for my bed because people always forget that cold starts in your feet. I hung up and cried for a different reason, not a lot. Just the relief kind. The next morning I found one more thing on my door, a small envelope with my name written pretty in blue ink that made my stomach drop before I even touched it. It was from the campus chaplain, not the pastor from my parents' church. Saw the pastor at your building, it said in a tidy hand. Turned him away. If you'd like to file a complaint with his denomination, I can walk you through it. In the meantime, there's a grocery card on the back, no strings. There was a sticker covering the number that said peel me. I smiled for real before coffee. Maybe that's nothing. Maybe it's everything. Sarah's college emailed me today. Sanctions applied, it said, which is the vaguest phrase in the world, but it included 3 specific sentences. She has a no-contact order with me extended to include my campus and anyone involved in the original complaint. She's banned from student organizations leadership at her school for a year for misuse of processes, and she is required to complete a counseling program for interpersonal conduct. It felt like watching someone finally tell the ocean to stay in its lane. It won't, but the sign is up, and people are looking. I keep thinking about that girl in our hallway training who said she became an RA because she wanted to be the adult she needed freshman year. That sounded big and lofty then. It feels smaller and sharper now. Today it looked like eating a bowl of cereal on my new bed and writing down 11:02 a.m., unknown number, sent flyer link, and dropping it into a folder with a name that makes sense only to me. It looked like telling a first year who lost his key that it happens and not to beat himself up, and taking him downstairs with my lanyard jangling and the glow stars waiting above my ceiling. It looked like texting John a photo of the plant his mom sent with the caption, "We will try not to kill it." Somewhere out there, probably, she's building a new version of the story with me as a villain with a gavel and her as Joan of Arc in a blazer. She might even be practicing crying in a mirror. In here, my door requires a key I signed for. My phone lights up with work schedules and group chats about whether we have enough paper towels. The stars are stuck where we put them, and when someone knocks, it's because they live on my floor and they need help with their Wi-Fi. It's not peace, it's something like it's scaffolding. I can build on that. I am.